Hey guys, welcome back to Maelstrom Gaming Studios. I'm Craig, and today we are doing another Tyranid Tournament list review. This is going to be the one that I took to my most recent RTT just the other day. And I did go 3-0 in it, so we're going to dive in because I think this is the best iteration of this list I have made up to date. It has kicked butt against the Grey Knights, Space Wolves, a very, very good Space Wolves list, Knights, and Tyranids themselves. We'll dive through this list and let you know everything you need to know about it in order to get the most out of it in case you guys want to try it for your own battle reports with your Tyranids. If you like this sort of content and want to stay up to date on everything we do here at Maelstrom Gaming Studios, whether it is tactics, list reviews, tactics, battle reports, things like that, please subscribe and like. It helps out us with the YouTube algorithm. We are a growing channel, small but growing, and every little bit helps us get higher and higher in the YouTube recommendations. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into this 2,000 point tournament list. What we have here is something that I've been slowly modifying from iteration to iteration. If you guys saw my video probably 3 or so months ago, I took a very similar list to a GT and did okay. I placed 10th place in overall points out of 55 or so, and I only placed, 15th in total ranking. It was okay, but this list I think is a better version of it, so let's go through it. So this is a Kronos list. It is designed to maximize the shooting potential that I have in this army. And I could go, a lot of people go with a Kraken combat element, though I love my Psychic so much and I don't want to have to worry about not being able to put certain buffs here and there and helping each other out. So I just play pure Kronos, and I don't really miss that Kraken ability too much in the army. So this list is led by Swarmlord himself. Of course, he is one of the linchpins to many of our Tyranid armies, and it's going to be weird, hopefully, in the coming Leviathan book, that we don't have to use Swarmlord every time. So it'll be interesting to see how lists modify there. We do have then a Flying Hive Tyrant. This one is kitted out with just dual Scything, Talons, and Wings. He has the Resonance Barb as well, and allowing him to cast his 3 powers a turn with the +1 to cast. He's basically kind of one of my more utility things. He will go after certain troop choices if he needs to chop those down, like 5-man intercessor squads. Those things are perfect for him to go chew on, and he can provide support with his psychic powers. Final HQ is my Neurothrope. He is the one who is giving out Symbiostorm to either the Exocrine or the Hive Guard, so he sits in the back line and does his thing. The troops are very straightforward. It is 3 groups of 10 Termagants. Their main purpose is to get me secondary points, whether that is engage in all fronts, retrieve Octarius data, raise the banners, things like that, and also screen my Hive Guard and my Exocrine in case my opponent has any really fast combat threats that I do have to be worrying about. I also have a group of Rippers. I never leave home without one group because you never know when deep striking an objective secured unit will come in handy throughout the game. The elites, this is where some of the heavy hitters are, some of them. We have a 5-man block of Zonethropes. I love doing 6, but I figured after playing testing, losing 1 Zonetrope and gaining an extra group of Termagants is a decent trade-off, and it has proven to be good in doing so. Yes, I don't get the flat 3 plus D3 mortal wounds, but 2D3 is still pretty good and can guarantee some damage, and the extra group of Gaunts is just that much more utility for grabbing objectives and screening. We have 6 Hive Guard. They are Hive Guard. They do the business. And we have 2 Lictors for, of course, getting engageable fronts, and I guess I've never done raise the banners with them. They can, but retrieve Octarius data is their other big one. Now for the real heavy hitters, we have my heavy support, which is my Scythe Hero Duel. I absolutely love this thing. It does do work, whether that work is pure damage or just taking shots absorbing firepower and stalling my opponent out for a couple turns. Or just one, depending on the opponent. But I love it. It's hard not to take one of these now that I have been taking them. So he's great. We have his brother, the Barbed Hero Duel. Also great. It's tough to say which one I like more. This one is more expensive, but the 2-up save is nice. Fun fact, I went 3-0 in this GT and totally forgot he had a 2-up save for the entire round. I don't think it mattered too much, but it did. It might have. Anyway, still worked out in the end, so he's great. He can shoot in combat just like this one, although his weapons are not as effective hitting-wise, though he will benefit from Kronos and everything like that. So I love them both. And finally, who is probably the MVP, now nerfed because of the Rising Tide book. They changed the Symbiostorm to be 6 unmodified 6s instead of 6 pluses. So no longer with the Exocrine can you do 5 pluses or additional shots. So unfortunately that game, the tournament I played yesterday, was the last time the Exocrine will be this powerful. I mean, it's hard not to do it, but he was the MVP in just, well, in most of the games. I'll talk about it again later, but yeah, those are the heavy hitters. That's the list. It's 2,000 points on the nose. It's very punchy, and we'll talk about how I played a little bit more. So the psychic powers, we'll go over those because this is a psychic and monster mash. We have, so like I said, the Resonance Barb on the Hive Tyrant. He has Catalyst, the Horror, and Smite. I think the Catalyst, in my opinion, is my most important one, where I shouldn't say the most important, but it is, having 5-up Feel No Pain is really important, and he's going to be in denial range if my opponent has anything to deny, most likely, and that's why I give the Resonance Barb, just to get that +1 to cast on him. And, you know, putting the Horror and doing some Mortal Wounds with Smite is always a great thing as well. The Swarmlord, he's got Onslaught, Paroxysm, and Smite, obviously. Rarely will I Smite with him, maybe if he's fighting someone, but Paroxysm is awesome if you have multiple combat threats going against him, or he's often with the Barbed Hero Duels, or the Scythe Hero Duel, so they'll help each other out. And Onslaught, in case he wants to send something up the table, he can put Onslaught on them and just give them that extra more distance. The Neurothrope, like I said, he's got my Symbiostorm and Smite. I used to be putting the Resonance Barb on my Neurothrope to guarantee Symbiostorm, though I found he's never in denial range, and with the rerolling 1s to cast, I had never really run into an issue with Symbiostorm not going off, or if it was an issue, then I didn't have too much. I never had an issue, so I've been sticking with it that way, and it's been working well for me. The Zonethropes is my usual special that I like, and that is running Psychic Scream and Smite on them to do those potentially 3d3 mortal wounds per psychic phase. And boy, are they wonderful. Some things to remember, because this is such a psychic heavy army, there's a few things. First one, Power of the Hive Mind. Cast 1 extra psychic power. The big thing where I would use this is if my Zonethropes went down to 3 models, they still know both psychic powers. They only have 1 cast, but if you need an extra D3 mortal wounds and it's like, there's 1 Terminator or something sitting on 1 or 2 wounds, you can use the stratagem here, cast the extra psychic power, and potentially get those mortal wounds to kill whatever you're working on. Only did it once, and it was fine, but something to keep in mind. Synaptic Channeling is a great one. You can know all psychic powers that are on the table. So I should say 1 Psyker unit knows all the psychic powers on the table. And where this can come in great is if you also pair this with Power of the Hive Mind, your Hive Tyrant can cast 4 psychic powers, all with a +1 to cast, and can do any of the psychic powers. So you really want to keep the Hive Tyrant around as long as possible, because he can do Smite Psychic Scream with that. He can do Smite, Catalyst, Psychic Scream, the Horror. He could do Symbiostorm if it push comes to shove and someone needs to get it off. He is really the big utility psyker with the mobility that he has. So I found out that he does just fine. And the dual Scything Talons is enough. It keeps him cheap. He still can kill some things in combat. And I didn't really have the points to put any guns on him anyway. So I'm happy with it. The secondaries that I take, well, I should say against the list that people often could take against me. Bring It Down, I can give up 10 points max. Typically, I should say all the games I played, no one took Bring It Down, but the most they could have done against me based on the scoring was 8. They never killed every monster. My Exocrine was always the last one alive, if he was the only one alive. Even then, it was Exocrine, Hero Duel, and Swarmy, and the Hive Guard cases were still all alive at the end of the game. No prisoners, not really worth taking on here, so that's fine. Grind Them Down, I didn't put it on here, but Grind Them Down is one you can take against this because it does have a decent number of minimum units plus focus firing the big bugs. A couple people did try that against me. It didn't work out that well, except for the Knight player did get a nice 9 points off of it. So what can you do when you're playing against Knights and they only have 6 models or something on the table, 7 models? It's hard to not get Grind Them Down. Abhor the Witch is the other big one because I do have all the Psychers. Again, it can be, your opponent could go for it, and it could turn into a bit of a trap because if you know they have Abhor the Witch, you're going to have to be more cagey with your Psychers, and that means not just rushing everything up the board. Your Neurothrope, you're going to keep him back. He'll be safe. There's no way he'll kill him in most cases. Swarmy, there's a good chance Swarmy will die. There's a good chance the Neurothropes will most likely die. If they have it, they're going to focus fire it. But for everything put in the Neurothropes, or the Zonethropes, they are not going to be put into your big bugs. So it's a bit of a trap for them, so that's kind of why I like it. Now, objectives in my favor. Retrieve Octarius data, it was an easy 8 points, and then some games I got 12. The Gaunts and the Lictors do just fine at scoring that. Normally a third Lictor is nice for doing Retrieve Octarius data, but I just don't have the points for it. I can't even swap out the Rippers to take a third Lictor. I do not have 1 point in this army to spare. Engage on all fronts was also an easy 8 points, and some games I could get up to 12. Never got 15, and that's pretty common when I was playing more reserved and not rushing something up the board or 2 things up the board right away. But I'm happy getting 8 to 12 points in that because this does a good job of denying secondaries as well. And then the last one, Bring It Down, depending on your opponent. Bring It Down I took, did great with that one at one point. No Prisoners, also did great with that one. Pierce the Veil is an interesting one. I never took it, but depending on your opponent, it could be a good one. Because you have so many Psychers, maybe you can spare Swarmlord Psychic Powers, or you could spare the Zonethropes Psychic Power, or the Neurothrope, etc., etc. It's got some potential. Stranglehold is another one you could take depending on the scenario. I am not a big fan of it because this army is more about denying primary points because you shoot them off the objective more than taking the objective from them. So Stranglehold is not the best one, but you know, it is. I mainly just look at what your opponent has. So the playstyle, let's talk about this a little bit because it is important. The deployment is probably the most important part about playing this army because you have to be so cagey in your first couple turns with it. So you always, always, always want to deploy as if you're going to go second. Never take the risk because while we do have some durability on the big bugs, we don't have enough durability to take multiple turns of high-powered shooting. None of them do. So you want to deploy, again, you can't hide the big ones, but deploy as if you're going second to minimize your damage and you take in case you go first. And if you do go first, luckily with this army, you can move and do your damage and take advantage of having a few first turn shots coming out, getting a few chip damages, because the Exocrine with 1 command point can move and count to standing still. So hide behind a building, pop out, shoot something, get an angle on it. Good to go there. Hive Guard, obviously, they can shoot up and over and around the building, so we don't have to worry about there. The hero duels have plenty of movement if they need to move to get in range after on a turn 1 or after turn 2. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Counter threats for charging, obviously, if they're an aggressive army in combat, we can send our combat units up pretty quickly to counteract it. So the Hive Tyrant, Swarmy, and the hero duels, their main job, of course, is killing the opponent, but it's really to stall and gum up the midfield of the board. The Hive Tyrant, not as much. You gotta be more careful with him, like I said. But Swarmy and the hero duels, you want to get them up in the midfield when the time is right and stall their combat threats and stall anything that can threaten your Exocrine and your Hive Guard, because they are the real dangers to your opponent. It's really just stall them. If you can get 2, 3 turns of full-on powerful shooting from these 2 units, there's a good chance your opponent will not have much left at the end of the game. Unless he's playing knights, then of course then he's going to have knights still going, but still, these things can just dish out so much damage in the first couple turns that it's most important to keep them alive, otherwise the list will fall apart. Now let's just talk about my RTT, because there isn't too much else to say. You've seen the list, you kind of heard how it plays, what I do, so I'll just give a little rundown of this list. So game 1 was awesome. There was only 2 of us NIDS players there, and it was a 10-player tournament, so nothing too crazy, but and everyone was there really with some fun lists and some powerful lists too. So he brought NIDS on NIDS, a monster mash of everything. It was 3 Dimacharons, 2 Scythier duels, Swarmy, Flyrant, 3 groups of 10 Hormagaunts, a group of Rippers, and 2 Lictors. I was so, I shouldn't say I was confused. It was baffling to me, because I have not played against Tyranids or played Tyranids on Tyranids in probably 8 or 9 years. No one in our community, I mean, there are people, it's growing, but there have never been a strong connection to Tyranids in our community, or no one has played them at a competitive, or tried to play them at a competitive level in a while. There are a few, but again, they're dwarfed by the Space Marines and the Admechs and the Drukhari and even the Chaos. So it was rare to see Tyranids on Tyranids. And it was interesting because I knew everything he was going to do from a tactical standpoint, from a what the models do and how he's going to use them. So that helped me out a lot, as I knew how it was going to go. But it was just weird fighting Tyranids. It's like, man, I have to think about this. Like, oh, I know I can do this. Well, he can do it too. The big thing that swung the game for me is that I was shooting, he was combat. I deployed very defensively on my back line, and I lost the roll-off to go first, which means he had to move forward, and he had to move up into the middle of the table. There was a good amount of line of sight blocking, like pure line of sight blocking, so I couldn't see everything, but it was just enough where I could focus fire bug after bug after bug and take them down and seal myself the victory. He had a really nasty turn 1 charge with the Dimacharon and Swarmlord pair. The Daima just leaped into my lines, even with my deploying pretty defensively. Knocked out some Zonethropes, not all of them, but knocked out some Zonethropes, killed a bunch of Gons. But I was able to make a wall enough to protect my Hive Guard from them. And in return, the Zonethrope smiting, Hive Tyrant smiting, Hive Tyrant combat, Hero Duel combat, everything just gang beat and took out the one Barb, or the one Dimacharon, and that was pretty good for the rest of it. Otherwise, it was just a shooting gallery, essentially, of big bugs. A lot of death, a lot of carnage. Fun game, and that was the first game for me. Second game against Knights. I'll try and put a few pictures I'll pop in here. I tried to take some of them, but I didn't want to touch the Knights to get better pictures because these things were amazing. They were custom converted like orc Knights. You played them as Imperial Knights, but Knights, there was a knight floating carrying a giant sun, and this sun, I mean, it just looked cool. There was one with big tentacle arms. There was just big orky ones, and I was terrified to go up against this list. I know Tyranids are not great at killing Knights unless they, like most armies, unless they are designed to kill Knights. They aren't great at doing it, and my army is not about taking primary by swarming and overrunning the primary. It's designed by killing off of the primary. So units like Knights is a struggle for it. It came down to basically I had one turn of 15 primary. Otherwise, every other turn we all had 5 or 0 primary points. It was a hold 2, hold 3, hold more. And it was so much blood, death, metal, everything that at the end of the game, there was 7 models left. And that was 2 Knights, 3 Gaunts, an Exocrine, and a Neurothrope. And that was left. Final game against a absolutely nasty Space Wolf list. This was Space Wolf successors, and they were taking the traits Whirlwind of Rage and Stalwart. Whirlwind of Rage, the reason you do that as Space Wolves is it pairs with the Assault Doctrine bonus that Space Wolves get. So each one of those rules, Space Wolves, Assault Doctrine, and World of Rage are 6s in the fight phase to hit, count as a hit. They do stack, so for every 6, they got 2 additional hits. Basically, you had Tesla Thunderhammers on Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminators. Absolutely nasty. The Stalwart is basically baby transhuman permanently throughout the entire army. So I can only ever wound him on 3s. And when you've got a lot of strength 8+, whether it's in shooting or combat, that was really annoying, and it saved so many wounds on him. Really good. The army was basically pure 4-up invuln saves or just bodies. He had 2 groups of Blade Guard, 2 groups of Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminators. He had 2 groups of Long Fangs with Cyclone missile launchers, Terminators in them. And it was just missiles everywhere. Nasty. I made a big blunder, and my Hive Guard was just sticking his toe out too far about the building, and he got first turn, was able to move his Long Fangs he deployed in the far corner of the map, was able to move them just enough, paid the CP to ignore the moving and firing penalty, and snuck crack missiles all the way down my Hive Guard, rolled never lower than a 4+ on the damage rolls on his crack missiles, and wiped them all out turn 1 before I even got to go. So the fact that I basically played that game without Hive Guard at a 250 point or 270 point disadvantage made it feel all that much better. I thought I was for sure downhill from there, but it was a great game. The big thing that won me that game was a clutch combat between Blade Guard, his Chapter Master, Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminators. Everything was piled in, and Swarmy and the Barbed Hero Duel survived on 1 wound each, and they were able to cut down the remaining enemies, and it was mainly just a mop-up of objectives towards the end. I don't remember the score on it, but I think I was able to sneak out with like 10 points above him on that. Overall, I feel good. He is one of the best players in our area. He's done very well, very close to winning Adepticons and other of our big major tournaments around. So that one felt good to have a win there. He's kicked my butt in the past before, and this is the first time I've gone up against him with my competitive Tyranids, and I was happy to get a win off like that. So that was it. That was my 3-0 RTT. If you guys want to try this out, go for it. Technically, like I said, this list is slightly nerfed now because of our big Kronos. Exocrine is no longer as powerful as he was, but it's probably for the better. Let me know if you try this one, it goes. stay tuned. We will be covering the new Rising Tide book. I have been studying the leaks, the rumors, the reviews that other people are doing. We are getting our book as soon as possible, and we will put out a large number of videos, multiple battle reports covering every aspect that that book gives us. So subscribe to see everything we are going to digest in that book, pun intended on the Tyranids, and we will figure out how to make that, because I am saying this right now, that book, Tyranids have, it's basically a 9th edition codex without stat changes to our models. It's as, out of all of those campaign books that have come out, I normally say, don't buy them, don't waste the money on them. But what the Tyranids get in that book is so good compared to any other army. So much life is being brought into the Tyranids. Now, will we be top meta competing with the Dark Eldar and the AdMech at every top tournament, everything like that? No. Will people be able to find some niche lists that will absolutely trounce certain opponents? I think so. And we're going to try and get all of us to that spot here on the channel so Tyranids can continue to rise back to where we belong at the top of the food chain. Thank you guys for watching. Again, stick around, subscribe, and like this video, and we'll be back soon again with much more Tyranid reviews. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you next.